Welcome to Friday. Happy Halloween. It's October 31st, 2025. Your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by the Advocates Injury Attorneys. If you've been injured in an accident, don't face it alone. Get an experienced local Wyoming attorney on your side. Free consultations at WyomingAdvocates.com or call 307-800-1952. You deserve an advocate. Severe clear. What does that mean? Well, it's so clear it's severe, meaning there's very little that we're going to have anything to talk about of any consequence for a little while. Through the rest of this week, the weekend, and deep into next week, while it will be a little cooler today, that backdoor cold front coming down along and east of the divide, but it will come through dry, not much wind. It's just going to be a little cooler today and kind of chilly tonight. Dry weekend will lead into a dry start to next week for a lot of the west. The exception is the far Pacific Northwest. Parts of southern Canada will get into some Pacific weather action, but high pressure will protect most of the Rockies and High Plains from any significant weather through at least Wednesday or Thursday. Now, we do see a frontal system coming in late next week. It's not going to be a big system, but it will change things up a little bit, but that won't be until Thursday or Friday. Long-term outlook, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, about when to expect things to get a little more wintry like. We'll talk about that as well. Nice sundog there from Sheridan. That sun shining through those high clouds, producing a very well-formed sundog. And when we look at the satellite imagery, we'll see maybe some sundogs again this morning with some high and mid-level clouds right here. There's not much moisture associated with this cloudiness, but it's a little patch of moisture coming at the higher levels. You can see the blue up here. This is the low cloudiness associated with the surge coming in behind that low pressure system up in the Dakotas that's sinking south. So this band right here is going to push south-southwest through the course of the day today, pushing that cooler air in along and east of the Continental Divide. Now, you may see the cloudiness here out in the Pacific Northwest, and if you take a look at the satellite imagery out in the eastern Pacific and the Gulf of Alaska, you're like, whoa, look at that storm. It must be coming our way. Well, it's coming to Western Canada and will get parts of Washington and Oregon, but it's mainly going to be an event up north of the border as the jet stream winds will direct this system eastward, not allowing it to take a dip south. But we will see Pacific systems straddle the U.S.-Canadian border this weekend into early next week, but most of the action is going to stay in the Great White North, and that'll be certainly the case with that storm there. So you can see all the blue, the low up here in the Gulf of Alaska. There's the system that's going to be pushing that cooler, moist air a little bit further south and west today, giving us this Halloween cool surge. High pressure, though, along the west coast, bringing some fair weather. As the days evolve, we go into by the weekend and into early next week. This is Monday. As we have been examining over the last day or two, westerly flow, Pacific air floods the zone. This is going to lead to above average temperatures, and the main jet stream is just not going to allow anything to come south of any consequences. But you can see all the lows up here in Canada. There's a lot of cold air building in the higher latitudes. Last week we had some really cold air in eastern Siberia, way on the other side of the hemisphere. So it's there. Cold air's there. It's building. There's just not the right mechanism yet for that cold air to penetrate south, at least of any duration. So we're going to spend most of next week in this west to east flow across North America, at least the lower 48. The weather up here will send frontal systems that will come into Canada and straddle along the U.S.-Canadian border. So there's going to be some windy periods up here. There's also going to be maybe some disturbances, but they're going to straddle the border for the most part. And when you look at the precipitation forecast for Tuesday, that's exactly what you see. The onshore flow will keep the Pacific Northwest wet west of the Cascades. But you can see not a lot of moisture is going to get east of the Cascades or the Canadian Rockies. Just a little bit out here, and most of that is going to be what's happening today and into tomorrow with that system up in south central Canada. So this is what we mean by severe clear. There's this very little happening for just about everybody through the weekend and into early next week. That equates to some nice autumn weather, really nice autumn weather. And I guess you get an extra hour this weekend with the clock going back an hour to enjoy it. And over the next 5 days, your temperature anomalies are all on the positive side, except up here in British Columbia. So it's going to be mild. We're not going to shatter records, but it's just going to be good November weather. Nice. Take advantage of it. Good opportunity to get some leaves raked up. And if you have not put that sprinkling system to bed yet, here's your last chance. Now, by Thursday, we do have one of those Pacific waves breaking off and pushing further inland into the Rockies. But notice it's kind of running into resistance because there's still this high pressure ridge, and this is going to try to kind of beat up the high pressure ridge, but the low and the trough coming in will get weakened because of that. It's not going to be able to maintain its integrity very well. But there will be some mountain showers. There will be some cooler weather and clouds coming in late next week into the central Rockies. But we structurally don't have anything yet that's going to send any real significant weather further south. And as long as the storminess stays bottled up in the Gulf of Alaska and this region here, that's not going to allow the displacement of colder wet weather of any consequence, at least, through next week in that area that I just circled. We have to see the weather change up here, and that's what we talked about yesterday, is it's got to change up here. When will that change? As we highlighted yesterday, the long-term trends are indicating the middle to the second half of November for that to happen. And that colder air that's building has opportunities to work their way further south. So we're going to probably be showing you graphs like this more often now that we're getting closer to the cold season. The Pacific North American Oscillation, when it goes near negative or below, gets further on the negative chart, that basically means there's going to be high pressure in the Eastern Pacific and low pressure in the Western United States in some form or fashion. So you can see how strongly positive it is right here currently and for the next several days ahead, hence the severe clear. But we do see it going down into that negative territory or getting closer to it with those systems coming off the Pacific and riding up across central Canada, but popping back up into positive, going a little bit negative. But when it starts to go negative and stays more negative, that's when things change out in the Eastern Pacific. And that is a week from this Saturday. So we're pushing out, it's going to be around the 10th and after the 10th, but you can see that it's going into the negative, staying there. So basically, this is when things change in the Eastern Pacific. So you see there's a phase change. Positive phase up here. That means high pressure over the Rockies and the Intermountain West. No real big cold intrusions. So you're going to get high pressure over the Rockies early in the period. Then we get after the 10th and we start to have more often low pressure in the Rockies and high pressure in the Pacific. Basically a flip, a reversal. Another oscillation that we look at is the Arctic Oscillation. Now, like the Pacific North American Oscillation, you can't use these as a precise tool to make a forecast, but it shows you what the trends are. Remember, trend is your friend. And when we see these phases, especially sometimes these oscillations will sync together. And when you put two negative phases together, that's a pretty strong signal that the weather's going to change. And what the Arctic Oscillation tells us is that when it's in a positive phase, the polar jet stream is stronger. The Arctic air is most likely to be locked up in Canada, like it is now. Now, when you go into a negative phase, the Arctic opportunities for the Arctic to send colder air south goes up. It doesn't mean you're going to go into an Arctic wave. What it means is the possibility, the chances somewhere in the northern hemisphere, you're going to see Arctic air push further south. So basically think of the Arctic Oscillation when it's in a strongly positive phase. Arctic air is locked up. It's going to stay up there. When it starts to go negative, it's going to start to want to move south. So when we take a look at the Arctic Oscillation, we see that we're generally near a positive phase, going into a positive phase right now, and then we start to go negative. When do we start to go negative? At about the same time the Pacific North American Oscillation goes negative. And you see this up and down right here? This up and down is classic because what it's showing is, okay, we're starting to get more waves. They're starting to go more south. The Arctic will have more of an opportunity to release cold air. Now, this is not strongly negative by any means, but it is showing a tendency to go bouncing up and down near that zero line. And eventually, as we get deeper into November and December, we'll probably see this phase start to meander down here. So we're seeing the phase change in the oscillations at approximately the same time that we know historically lead to colder, more active weather in the western United States. So mid to late month, a much different story. In the meantime, it's severe clear. See you Monday.